and welcome to the UA SafeState Accelerating Toward P2 webinar series. Today's session is titled Shifting to Success, and here Ms. Kalyn Tew will introduce and guide us through the process of identifying chemical emissions and how implementing source reduction activities will improve processes at your facility. My name is Ashley Chambers. I'm the Environmental Accreditation Manager here at UA SafeState, as well as an active member of our pollution prevention team within environmental programs at UA SafeState. These weekly webinar series our team has put together the past month, they have a special emphasis on the automotive sector, especially OEM facilities and suppliers. So just a quick introduction into our program, but really before that, some housekeeping tips. So this morning during our webinar, all participants have been set to mute to help eliminate background noise. This webinar is being recorded because we are going to post this on our website as a future resource for anyone interested in pollution prevention strategies at their facility. Today, because everybody is on mute, we encourage everybody to utilize that chat feature down at the bottom of your screen or at the top of your screen, wherever your menu is. Chatting and putting your questions there really help us keep this presentation interactive. At the end of our webinar series, we're going to send out a post-webinar survey to really gauge our future clients, hopefully, and find out what works and how we can best serve you. So introducing UA SafeState, we are here on campus at the University of Alabama. We are within the College of Continuing Studies. And within UA SafeState, we have three main divisions. Our Occupational Safety and Health Consultation Group, they have an OSHA 21D grant where they do free facility assessments, specifically looking at those OSHA regulations and health considerations for small and medium-sized businesses. We have a training and conferences group that focuses on bringing large events to the state of Alabama, whether that's training or large conferences like the Alabama Governor's Health and Safety Conference. This is also the OSHA Training Institute Center. So we have a lot of train the trainer events in regards to our OSHA teams. Our Environmental Programs Division, that's the group that we represent, and we're so excited to have you today. So yeah, go on ahead, Kalyn. That next screen. So within environmental programs, we offer lots of resources to customers, some fee-based, but as we'll discuss today, there are lots of things that we have going on that are free and available to certain industries at certain times. So starting off with our environmental compliance review, our facility group, we go in and we take a look at a business's processes in regards to environmental regulations. So this first section here, our ECRs, they are confidential, they are fee-based, but it's a very low-cost option for businesses who just need help getting back on track in regards to local regulations, state environmental regulations, and especially their federal compliance there. We serve as the environmental accreditation agency for asbestos and lead-based paint professionals in the state of Alabama, as well as training providers, so that group is always busy as well. Our field services team, we go out into the field, into homes and businesses who need help with lead-based paint, asbestos inspections, indoor air quality. We stay pretty busy there working with citizens and with municipality groups across the state of Alabama and beyond. We are the HERA compliance monitoring group for the state of Alabama. So our team works with local education agencies in regards to removing asbestos hazards and mitigating those hazards in Alabama schools. And then what's bringing us here today is our pollution prevention program. So this free program, thanks to a grant by the EPA, allows UA SafeState, our team, to provide businesses with technical assistance and training to find ways to reduce waste, save costs, and improve processes at their facility. And with special emphasis on the automotive sector right now, we're so excited to bring this webinar series out to everyone. So please help share this. At the end of this webinar, we'll post this to our website. But we're so excited. We have a lot of fun during these facility assessments. They are completely free and they are confidential. So the report generated at the end of our facility assessment, once we take a look at a facility's programs, all the different aspects from air to water to wastewater to energy usage and waste, we generate a recommendations report. There's no obligation for our recommendations to be implemented, and it's confidential. So it's a really great way for a facility to gauge how their processes are going at their facility. All right, so without further ado, Kalyn, thank you so much for sharing your screen. I'm going to roll it over to you. So everyone, Ms. Kalyn Tew will be our presenter today. She is going to discuss opportunities on preventing chemical emissions, and with a special emphasis, again, on what we're all here for. So P2, pollution prevention and source reduction activities. Kalyn is also a member of our UA SafeState team. She is on our field, she is a field analyst, an environmental analyst on our field services team, and an integral part of our facility assessments reviews for pollution prevention. So Kalyn, if you will unmute yourself, I will mute myself and I'll let you take it away.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Kalyn Tew, and Ashley did a great job of introducing me. So I'm kind of the boots on the ground person at facilities. So a lot of times I'm the one that's going out and helping to figure out what kind of source reduction activities can go on at their facility. So we're going to go over a lot of these today. Having trouble advancing my slides. There they go. All right, so first, the major thing is understanding what your TRI listed chemicals are at your facility and identifying the most common ones that you might see if you're an automotive sector industry. We're going to learn about some of the health hazards that are associated with these chemical releases, and then understand how you can really manage these releases and the waste that's coming from your facility from these chemicals. Once we get to understand that kind of management process, then we're going to learn about some options for reducing your overall waste from these chemicals, and then go into differentiating between other options for managing these chemicals as waste if you can't reduce your use altogether. Oh, it's going the wrong way now. So a quick background here. The toxic release inventory system was developed in reaction to a lot of different incidents that occurred in the industrial facilities that produced these toxic chemicals. So a large one occurred in 1984 in Bhopal. This plant was near a really densely populated, poverty-stricken area, and about 600,000 people were exposed to a release of methyl inoscyanatate. 30 years later, this toxic material still remained on site, and over the whole time that this release has occurred, there was a death toll of about 15,000, and all the chronic effects of it are still seen. So following this incident, another occurred at another Union Carbide facility in West Virginia. And this was a tank explosion. It killed 2 workers. Later on, an additional leak occurred at the West Virginia plant with about 150 residents that had to be treated. So all of these accidents lead to public concern about the toxic chemicals on site at the nearby facilities. And there needed to be a way to kind of track these chemicals so that the leaks like this can be anticipated and prevented in the future. So that's why the toxic release inventory was created, in order to ease this public concern. The federal government created this inventory to track the cradle to grave lifespan of like your toxic chemicals for certain industrial sectors. Reports are required annually, and you must submit one for each chemical if they're in a specific industrial sector that requires reporting. So some of these sectors that are required to submit are mining, utilities, manufacturing, certain wholesalers, publishing companies, and hazardous waste handlers. If your company has more than 10 employees, you also will need to submit. And the process does vary on when you need to actually submit your chemical inventory. So if you create, process, or use chemical above a threshold amount as established by the EPA, and again, this varies, so about 25,000 pounds if you manufacture or process the chemical. And if you're using the chemical, that threshold is a lot less, at about 10,000 pounds. So chemicals are considered toxic if they continuously or frequently cause significant adverse human health effects, chronic effects, or a negative effect to the environment. So there's a lot of different ways that they can be considered a toxic issue. And to be classified as a release of a chemical, you would have to have it released to the environment either as a waste or a byproduct that doesn't go through any type of treatment or recycling options And these can be released in a lot of different ways that you might not think about. So if it's released as wastewater or stormwater, so anything that's entrained in your water as it leaves the facility, through land disposal. So even if you're taking it to a landfill or dump that's treating it once it's off site, you're still in charge of that chemical at that point. And also air. So this is going to be your evaporation of chemicals through anything, or evaporation of chemicals, and also through your smokestacks or as flue gas if you're burning. Any of these are considered as emissions as well. So for the automotive industry, these are here are the top 10 chemicals which were released. We're going to look at the top 5 more specifically. So the top 5 here are our glycol ethers, our trimethylbenzene 1,2,4 specifically, butyl alcohol N specifically, and then xylenes and zinc. So you may note here that the top 4 are actually all the form of air emissions. So these are going to be ones that are evaporating off at your facility, as well as some of the others that are in the top 10, so your toluene and styrene, while your nitrate and your zincs are going to be things that are probably going to go in your land disposal or through water flow. So we're going to focus for the rest of this presentation, because it's such a large amount of the releases, is our air emissions, so our top 4 here. And just to show you, a majority of these releases are actually coming from your upstream suppliers. And this is a really handy graphic, which shows how the suppliers are such a big part of the manufacturing process. And this is important because they might not be covered by TRI and are typically not considered part of the automotive industry, but they produce the majority of the products which generate the emissions. And they also, in addition to creating it, once they go upstream, when the products are used, is a lot of time when these emissions are being generated. So for the top 4 emissions we saw on the last slide, the ones in red on this slide, so our basic organic chemical manufacturing and our paint and coating manufacturing, are the ones that generate the most potential releases from emissions. So there's a bunch of them at the facilities clearly, but how are they being used? So we're going to get into the major uses of these chemicals. I encourage you, as we're going through these, just think about the products you use, and if you have similar chemicals to the one we're listing that may serve the same purpose, because they also might be reportable to TRI, and so the things that we're talking about today to reduce them would apply to you as well. So all 4 of the top chemical emissions are used as solvents, and especially in paint, lacquers, dyes, coatings, and inks. All 4 of the top ones are colorless, so they're great as a paint thinner. They help to prevent chipping and paint foaming, and they enhance a lot of the properties that are important for paint, such as evaporation rate, blush resistance, and solubility for your coating resins. So in addition to painting, they're also important in cleaning products. They dissolve and remove material from parts during the cleaning and degreasing products, and they're pretty efficient at it. In addition, 3 of the top chemical emissions are used in brake and hydraulic fluids, and 3 are used as fuel and fuel additives, with 2 also being used as lubricants. So from all of this, you can see how widespread they are in the automotive industry. They're basically in every process that you do in the building of a car. And the problem with this is there are so many hazards associated with them. These hazards really can impact your working environment, and so we'll get into what these look like. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with these global harmonization standard labels and pictograms. So for our glycol ethers, 1,2,4-TMB, and N-butyl alcohol, they're all considered an irritant. And all 4 of our top emissions are considered flammable. And finally, glycol ethers also have some additional issues with health hazards and acute toxicity. And this is just a general guideline put out by GHS, but they actually have a lot more effects than what's just listed from their pictograms. So we'll go into those. First, we'll go into what occurs if you have an acute exposure. And that's going to be a large dose over a short interval. So you can think of something like an accidental release or accidentally just getting a big whiff of the chemical while you're using it. This is going to be the kind of reactions that you'd expect. So all of them have narcotic effects and also effects on overall brain function, including drowsiness and fainting, headaches and dizziness, and anxiety and confusion. In addition, They have effects to the lungs, either by causing fluid buildup around the lungs due to respiratory irritation, or it can cause coughing, wheezing, sneezing, and sore throats. So all of these different issues. Two of them, your 1,2,4-TMB and your xylenes, affect your muscles, and you can even develop coordination issues if you get a really strong exposure to this. Glycol ether also specifically can damage the kidney and the liver in high doses. And finally, in-butyl alcohol and xylenes cause a lot of other nasty problems, including irregular heartbeats, eye damage, and skin irritation, and nausea and vomiting. So in addition to those acute effects, chronic exposure is also a large issue with these kind of chemicals, and especially in the automotive industry, because this is an exposure to a continuous small dose over a long period of time. So if you're working with the same chemical every day without the proper protection, or even if you have it, but you're doing it for such a long period of time, these effects start to compound on each other. And so some of these are anemia, which is glycol ethers and 1,2,4-TMB. For 1,2,4-TMB, you also could develop asthma, chest tightness, and shortness of breath. In addition, 3 of the 4 of the top chemical emissions cause dry and red cracking skin and skin irritation that has to be treated by a medical professional, and it can be kind of continuous for the rest of your life. You can also develop neurological effects that are long-term, and these are due to glycol ethers, in-butyl alcohol, and your xylenes. And again, we have some additional effects from in-butyl alcohol. So liver and kidney damage and hearing damage are both things that you can expect from long-term exposure. So just from that, you probably would want to reduce your emissions to improve the health and safety of your workers that are breathing this in. And it's not just these chemicals. Again, any emission-causing TRI chemicals that you use at your facility can cause health issues. And just because you don't use one of these top 4, it doesn't mean that what you're using is safe. But like it says here on this slide, reducing the use of your TRI chemicals at your facility is not just better for your health. It's got a lot of good benefits, including your company's bottom line. Having less emissions at your facility due to the reduction of these chemicals will lead to less emission-related fees, which is great. This is going to include your permitting and regulatory restrictions. They'll be lessened if you're underneath a certain threshold for your chemical used. Another, a big one that I can think of is that you'd want to eliminate your air permitting fees, and that'll be if your regulatory body approves of the change when you reduce the amount that you use overall. In addition, you've got less product to use overall if you've reduced the amount, which means you've got more time between your restocks, which is less money spent for the same amount of time for every unit that you manufacture. And also, you can't ever escape using green products is going to give happy customers because everyone loves a green image. In addition to that, a lot of times the ways that you can reduce involve substituting out your chemical. And a lot of times it can be something that's cheaper. So this is going to lead to more money per unit that you make. And lastly, you have less chemical waste, which is going to be less waste related fees. So all of your disposal, a lot of times if you have a hazardous waste, the facility that you dispose at is going to charge you more than if it's a non-hazardous waste. So you want to switch to a less hazardous chemical just for that. So for those, I'm sure there's a lot of you out there watching now or on the recording later, and you aren't the one in charge of really deciding what products you use. So if you want change at your facility, the best thing that I can offer is to drive home the cost of these, the cost saving benefits of these, including especially the permitting costs and the regulatory fees. That's a really good way to get your kind of people who are in charge of those decisions to respond instead of just driving home the health issues as well. All right, so now you know that you should be reducing them. So the next question is, how do you reduce them? And there's this great triangle image here, which I love, that's basically showing you the ways that you can manage waste at your facility. And again, anything that you use at your facility is going through its life cycle and will end up as waste if it's not your final product that you're selling. And we'll go through the first way of management, which is source reduction. And this is just where you use less of the product in order to reduce the amount of waste you're producing overall. This is the most cost-effective, basically because you're using less product. Another option, and which is considered part of source reduction, is substituting the product altogether to a safer product. And this brings the use of your TRI chemical down to 0, which is a great way to reduce the source. This is also, source reduction is the most cost-effective way to deal with your waste because you aren't paying to do any of these bottom 4 options. So you're not paying for recycling, energy recovery treatment, or your disposal fees, and because you're just not generating it in the first place. Next, we'll get into some options for how you're actually going to reduce your chemicals at the source. And we'll get into first the reducing your emissions from paint, dyes, and coatings. And remember, all 4 of our top chemical emissions are used in this, so it's a great and easy way to reduce the amount you're using at your facility. And this seems very straightforward, but a lot of facilities that I've visited have not been doing this. So the main thing that you can do that's just a quick way is to keep your paints away from your extreme temperatures because this increases the shelf life. So you're not throwing away your product as frequently and wasting it. You also want to use your older paints first before opening new paints because older paints will expire first. So it sounds obvious, but doing these 2 simple things, you can really save product. And a lot of times this could be ordering from your supplier only when you run out so that you're never left with extra product that you're wasting. Another thing is to use pumps, spigots, and funnels to keep paint from spilling during transfer. So you can see in this photo here, we've got some funnels, we've got a really well sealed container, and we've got some spigots in the background. And not spilling paint obviously means that that paint's not wasted during spilling. And on top of that, keeping your lids tight during this process reduces your loss due to evaporation. So all of these chemicals that we're talking about, they do evaporate quickly, and that will prevent them from being able to be escaped that way. Another option, and it might not be an option at your facility, but if you have this available to you, you might want to mix your own paint because then that way you're only mixing the paint that you need, which will generate less paint waste overall. And if you have that ability, you might be able to change your formula in order to reduce the use of your TRI emission solvents. I've seen a lot of studies where they've been able to lessen the amount of solvent that they've used overall and keep their product basically the same and effective. If you are mixing, you want to train your personnel to mix paint correctly. And this is so important for anything that you do, making sure your personnel are trained correctly, because then they won't lead to as many defects and you're not wasting your product from this. In addition, you got to do some training to apply the paint correctly if you are in the application business. This is important because you're wasting less paint if done correctly the first time, and it reduces your excess paint use. It'll also reduce your defects and needs for paint corrections. I've gone to a lot of facility where they've got just trays of defects that they're not able to use. And you just got to think how much of that's related to not being trained properly in the first place. Another thing, this is done in most large automotive facilities at this point, but if you've not done it yet, this is a great consideration, using a high volume, low pressure gun. These are the most efficient on the market. You use less paint for your jobs. And again, if you're using other guns, you can be wasting as much as 70% of your paint. Another option is to use software that calculates how much paint you need. That way you're not pulling out more than you need to completely cover a car and you're not wasting product. You also want to maintain your equipment and replace it if it begins operating inefficiently. This is another thing that I will see at facilities. They'll be using a gun that's partially clogged to continue to paint, and they're just saying, oh, I'll clean it later. You need to, as soon as you notice that you're not operating at 100%, go ahead and switch that out because you're wasting so much in little increments that will add up to a lot more in the long run. So knowing all of this, the best thing that you can do is walk through your facility and really observe all the activities. Look around and see if there's any ways that you can reduce the amount of paint you use, either in whatever processes that you have at your facility. Are you pulling too much out of stock and opening them and then not using it all? You want to check if you're efficient, if your spray guns are operating efficiently, and immediately change them out if they're not, or just make sure they're cleaned well so that they will operate efficiently. And then just overall notice if there's any paint on the floor. Are you seeing any kind of leaks of paint or your coatings or your inks or anything like that? because if that's wasted during the process, then that's something that can be easily remedied. In addition, you can look at some options for reducing your use of solvents in your cleaning processes. So again, all 4 of our top chemical emissions, they're used in solvents and cleaning. So this is another easy way to reduce quickly. Just like you've seen this slide before, the same thing applies here. If you're keeping your lids tight and using your funnels, pumps, and spigots, you're having less spills and leaks. So you're not using as much cleaning product. So it's a double, it's good for both you're reducing your paint and reducing your cleaning overall. Again, training is so important. You want to train your personnel in your proper cleaning procedures. Well-trained people know how much cleaning product they need and won't overuse. So you definitely want to have some kind of standard of procedure for whatever type of spill that you're expecting, so that they know, oh, I need to grab, this solvent and use this much. That's a really good way to reduce the amount you're using. At some facilities, this is a possibility, changing your production schedules in order to minimize your equipment changeovers, as well as your feedstock or color changeovers. So let's say you're painting 5 different colors in a week. Maybe you could do 1 color a week and switch out every week instead of daily from 1 color to the next. And then that way you're not having to cleaning in between each time you change over to a new color. Some options, if you don't have a specific color that's expected in your product, or you can have a little more leeway in what colors that are occurring, you could start with your lighter colors and then progress to dark colors in order to reduce your cleaning in between. There are some more effective cleaning methods out there. Automatic gun cleaners are great because instead of manually cleaning your paint gun, you've got an automatic process that's calculated for you. So you can reduce your solvent use and paint solvent waste by up to 80% based on some studies. Another option is to use an enclosed washing system. This is great if you're using solvents because you're not having your solvent evaporate off as quickly if it's enclosed. It's important to monitor the amount of solvent you use, because if you're using more than necessary, which a lot of times occurs, especially if you're just drenching your part in solvent to clean it, there might be better ways to go about that. And also you want to pre-clean your guns if they're heavily dirty. That way you can use less cleaning solvents. And I've seen this a lot as you use your waste solvents from another cleaning to pre-clean your gun, and then you use a clean solvent to finish off your gun. So we've looked at all these. I'm going to show you a quick video that by Toyota where they have done a source reduction based on their cleaning activities at their site.
The Toyota facility in Cambridge, Ontario, employs more than 5,000 diverse team members, all working together to manufacture some of North America's most popular vehicles. But sometimes, one individual can come up with an idea that makes a huge difference. Meet Dawn Yi. A few years ago, Dawn was a student at University of Waterloo and a co-op at TMMC. As she studied and learned the painting process, she noticed every time a new color was applied to a bumper, a solvent-based chemical was used to clean the nozzles of the high-tech robots. And Toyota was using an excess of that solvent.
My manager, Ryan Sloot, asked me if I had any suggestions to improve cleaning efficiency. As I watched the robots use the solvent and water mixture to clean between colors, I wondered a couple of things. First, was the solvent mixture actually designed to clean our new paints? And secondly, how much solvent is really needed in the mixture to do the cleaning of the nozzles?
Turns out, not nearly as much. With the help of the University of Waterloo and other Toyota team members, Dawn did the research, analysis, and testing. And the result was amazing. A reduction in solvent by 80%, and a total cost savings of almost $600,000 every year.
Our lab was able to utilize a sophisticated approach combining experiments and modeling of the Toyota paint booth environment. And it was really exciting to see the amount of solvent reduction that was possible. This is real-world application of our curriculum that would not be possible without Toyota's partnership.
Dawn's approach and material savings also had a positive effect on quality, reducing the number of defective bumpers by over 50%.
We are super proud of Don's accomplishments. It is so great to be able to see a group of young students who epitomize the Toyota culture of continuous improvement and are able to see very real-world results. Not only does Don's activities save materials, but it helps lower costs and improves our quality.
And it makes me feel great because now, as a full-time engineering specialist, I'm helping other students under co-op terms. And I'm helping Toyota make a better planet.
Want to know more about Toyota's ongoing efforts to reduce waste while helping Toyota establish a recycling-based society? Visit Toyota's Environmental Ideas and Action page.
All right, so from that you can see there's a lot you can do, and it's stuff that it just maybe takes a set of fresh eyes to come look at your process and see if there's something different that you could be doing. So now we're going to get into some more source reduction opportunities, but these are going to be substitutions. So changing out your more hazardous product for a less hazardous product. Your first option is to switch to a high solid, low VO. Specifying first, we're going to go through our paint and coating substitutions first. So all of those different options. Your first option for paint and coating substitution would be changing to a high solid, low VOC paint coating. Many suppliers do have a low VOC option for paints. You might just have to ask about it. And the good thing about this is high solid paint actually transfers better, which means you're going to save paint and money over time. It does cost more up front to buy these paints, but you're using less coats for the same product. So it actually comes out cheaper in the end. Another option is to use waterborne base coats, paints, and primers as opposed to solvent-borne. So these are great because they have a low VOC content. Often for these as well, you're using fewer coats because it does apply better. It's easier to blend and match paints if you're using a water-based coat, and you're producing less harmful fumes, so it's great because it's safer for your workers. In addition to that, water-based coatings aren't going to be flammable and they are less toxic. The big thing about these that's something to consider if you're thinking about switching over is you do have to use some type of air and heat to dry properly. Usually it's going to be a type of blower or ventilation system that you would need to install in order to make this work. But it has the added benefit as well of if you're cleaning your water-based base coats, then you're also using water-based cleaners. So you're reducing solvent for your cleaning and your painting at the same time if you switch over. There are some more drawbacks to this. Again, water-based paints could use more energy because you're having to do ventilation and drying requirements. So you definitely want to see if you have the capacity to switch over, use more energy, and use less TRI chemicals. You also need to retrofit your spray booths because you need to have your equipment available to use waterborne paints. And they do cost more, but it's important to note you're using less paint overall because you're again using these fewer coats. And also, something that I've noticed in a couple of different studies is that a lot of waterborne coatings can contain hexavalent chromium and lead. So you want to be sure if you're actually switching over to another product that what you're using is safer. Another option is to be using UV paint or electron beam curing for your paints. So for this UV paint curing, you're basically having a light or electron beam in order to cure your paints. And this is great because it's a really quick drying time. I mean, instantly to a few seconds is not bad at all. The thing with this is you do have to use compatible inks and coatings. You can't just use your regular paint and run it through a UV cycle. This is a great technology though because it's solvent free, and it also has the added benefit of UV cured paints actually have an increased resistance compared to your regular solvent-based paints. And like the water-based paint, it does cost more per gallon, but you need less for coverage, and it becomes a much more efficient product because of its hardening and resistant abilities. So it does pay off compared to your water-based and solvent-based paints. Another option, and this is not new, I'm sure most of y'all have heard of powder-based coatings or might be using them at your facility now. Basically just a dry color powder is applied to your metal surface. The application is done electrostatically with an electrostatic gun, and then the color is baked on. This is a great product because you only need one coat, and it works well for a really durable, resistant finish if that's what you're looking for. And it costs less than our UV paints and our liquid paints, so our solvent and our waterborne paints. and there's no VOC released during the powder-based coating process. But there are some drawbacks. It's much heavier than traditional paint, so if you're looking to produce a lighter auto body, which is a big thing now as we're increasing energy efficiency of cars, this might not be a good option for you. And it also typically applies as a bumpy surface. And so this is going to be better for our under the hood products, things that aren't going to be on the surface of the car. And the initial costs are actually pretty large for your coating equipment that you are required to buy, but it is a payoff over time. So if you aren't able to change your paint process out completely, you might just want to change what kind of additives you're putting in your paint and coating. So different types of solvents. There's some options for natural and eco-friendly paint thinners and solvents instead of your high VOC ones. These are going to be a lot of different times, but one of the major ones that can be used with paint is citrus-based solvent. So the problems with this, it does evaporate more slowly, but it's way safer to inhale, so better for your workers. And it's cheaper to dispose of because it's non-toxic. It can also be used for dewaxing and degreasing, so you can use it both as a cleaning product and as a paint thinner, and there's no VOCs in it. And if you aren't able to do something like this citrus-based solvent, because of a lot of time for heavy industrial soiled parts, this is not going to be your way to go. Or sorry, that's for the cleaning, but also for your painting. A lot of times if you're industrially painting and you need a very durable coat, this is not a great option. So instead, you might want to look for a low VOC paint thinner that's synthetic, which there's a lot out there that a lot of companies do create. So here's a case study from Chevy Malibu. In 2017, GM actually began to use a 3-wet paint operation system. So this is going to be a water-based coating system. And it was great because they can apply 3 coats before baking. And this leads to a 1 trip through the baking process, reducing their energy use. In addition to that, since it's water-based, they reduce their solvent emissions as well. So this is overall a 50% less process energy per vehicle. So that's a great reduction. And this is only being done at 1 plant currently. So they've determined that when full production is achieved, approximately 108,000 pounds of solvent per year can be reduced. So that's a really great thing to see. All right, so after our paint substitutions, now we're going to go into our cleaning substitutions. Cleaning substitutions can be something as simple as natural-based solvents for your low, not very soiled parts and other parts of your facility. So you could use citrus-based, terpene-based, which are also going to be natural. They're derived from different types of oils, including pine and citrus, and soybean-based. If you need something a little more heavy, alcohol-based solvents, hydrofluorocarbons, and synthetic low VOC solvents are all options that you could use. This is a really great link here at the bottom here, which is our SNAP substitutes. EPA has put out an amazing website where you can go and check out all these different substitutes that they have listed and how efficient these substitutes are at cleaning for different types of parts. So we'll go into the tools a little bit later on, but just so you know, this is a good source for these kind of cleaning solvent substitutes. In addition to just changing out your solvent, you can switch to an aqueous cleaning system instead. So this is great because you're using a majority of just water with less than 5% VOCs. It's going to be typically non-flammable unless you've got some kind of strange chemical that you're using with it. And the great part about this is your dirt's removed either using heat, agitation, or soap action and not through solvent. So your first option for this is using a water-based foam. This is great to adhere to your parts. So this increases the time that your soap is actually in contact with the product, and it reduces the amount of cleaner required because of the longer time. This is not great for the heavily soiled equipments and parts though, because you can't have contact with all of the soiled part in this case. Another option is an immersion unit. So this is just immersing the part and soaking it for a long time until you can manually scrub them. This is great for lightly soiled, and the heavily soiled parts are definitely going to need to soak longer, but it is possible. Another great option is a water-based substitute. So this is a microbial sink water-based substitute. So for this, you're using microbes actually to clean your parts. And this is a really cool process because these microbes are living and they really like hydrocarbons and grease. So they will digest these kind of products really easily. It's good because it's cheaper than solvents and it can be recycled. So as long as these microbes have a food source, they will continue to reproduce and you can use it as much as you like. It's good for parts that are only mildly dirty. It'll take a long time for them to eat through a heavily soiled part, all the oil and grease on it. But it's really good for use on a frequent basis because you're continuously giving it food, the bacteria, so it's great. And these are very often seen in a lot of vehicle maintenance facilities, so it's worth looking into. Another option is a spray cabinet. This is also seen in a lot of vehicle maintenance facilities. Basically, you just put your parts in the cabinet and it's closed and you use a high pressure spray in order to clean the parts. And this is great for heavily soiled. It's just like pressure washing. And lastly, we have the ultrasonic unit. And this video is going to start going. And I'm going to kind of talk while it's going. So what happens here is they're using ultrasonic waves in order to create very tiny bubbles on the parts. And each of these bubbles cause high pressures and temperatures on the surface, which it's in contact with. And this assists in the cleaning process. So this is a really good product because it gets interiors as well as exteriors of the part. So if you're working with something that's soiled on the interior and it's not something you can scrub, an ultrasonic unit is a great option. And here it goes, just so y'all can see what it looks like. So it goes for a while here, but it's just really neat. It's a very good way to get soiled material off of parts. So some good benefits of a water-based solvent. It's typically not hazardous. It's only going to be hazardous if you have your grease, oils, or your heavy metals entrained in the water as it leaves the facility. If it's not hazardous, it can just be treated like your normal waste, which is great because then it's way cheaper than disposing of it as a toxic waste. There are some problems with water-based cleaning, mainly just you can use a lot of water if that's your main way that you're cleaning out your facility, which is bad for the water bill and for the environment. But there are options to recycle the water. This is great because a lot of times, especially the spray cabinets or the microbial sink, you can just continuously recycle what you're using and not continuously be running up your water bill. And this is better for the environment too. So a lot of the aqueous-based cleaners that we went over can be used indefinitely, like the microbe sink and the spray cabinets. But basically, if you can take your water, run it through some type of unit to remove the oil and grease, you can continue to use it as long as you like. And the additions are only needed if you have loss due to evaporation of your water or your cleaning product entrained in your water. It does have a higher energy cost because it requires heating in order to be effective, because almost all water-based cleaners work better when at high temperatures. And lastly, the parts could rust. So exposure of water will cause that. So using some type of inhibitor in the water or just really drying your parts well will help us with reducing your chances of rust. So here's a case study, and this is a woodworking company, but they have done some really cool things that are really applicable to the automotive industry. They've installed an ultrasonic cleaner at their facility, which replaced their solvent cleaning, and they use they have paint guns. So they put their paint guns in the ultrasonic cleaner and use Simple Green all-purpose cleaner, which is a low VOC form of cleaner, and run it through the ultrasonic unit. And they've proven that this works well for both their water-based and their solvent-based paints. Their benefits have been reported to be that it's less labor intensive. They were usually taking a couple hours to really get their parts cleaned, but this process only takes about 30 minutes. And it also cuts down on their solvent costs because they're not having to use as much solvent in their cleaner as opposed to if they would have if they used a high VOC, high solvent cleaner. In addition, they've also changed how they send their samples to their clients. So when their clients are looking for a new color, they prioritize their water coating samples in the front of their book compared to their solvent-based paints. So they noticed from this that there was a better approval of their lighter colors and lower sheens from their water-based paints, which are pretty typical for water-based paints. For their dark, opaque, and glossy coatings, solvent-based still won out. But because they had these options first, it actually estimated reductions of about 12 tons of VOCs per year overall. So there are some common reasons reported to the EPA for why their reductions and substitutions are not performed. The main ones are just there's no known chemical substitutes. Your formula may be proprietary. You may not have the money. You might have some product quality concerns, or you might have done all of your substitutions already, or you attempted and it didn't work out, so you had to go back to the old way. But there are some workarounds for all of these, and often you do still have options. So for the no known substitutes for some chemicals, the EPA actually has a really good group, or a really large list, and so do some other groups as well, of potential substitutes, and they include information on how to use safe and effective substitutes as well. Also, the formulas are proprietary. That could be an issue, and it's much harder to change, but to convince those in charge that switching to a different formula is safer and cheaper, that's the best way you can really get the ball rolling. Also, for the insufficient capital, we saw from the last few slides that often the safer option can be cheaper. And it's not just for the management fees, but actually for the price per unit produced. And we also saw from the last few slides that the safer option may also lead to better product quality, like the UV system. So that's a worry that can actually be easily remedied. And for the last two, it's important to mention that the technology is always changing. The EPA is providing so many incentives for companies to find better alternatives. So there may be a new product on the market that can be used as a substitute, which maybe didn't exist the last time you checked. So the bottom line is there are almost always rooms for improvement at your facility if you really know where to look. And we can help you with that. SafeState's really good at helping to find these projects or products. So you may be listening through this whole presentation knowing that you don't have these types of emissions at your facility, but maybe your suppliers do. Or maybe you don't know if your suppliers use these products or not. So understanding what happens throughout your supply chain is so important for reducing the chemicals at the source. You may be able to talk to your suppliers about using greener options, which are just really options that have a smaller environmental footprint. Or if you have an option, maybe switching suppliers to a more environmentally friendly group may be a good choice. So I've included a link here for a great resource, which is a list of suppliers that currently meet the federal sustainability requirements. I definitely suggest checking this out if you are considering switching suppliers, or if you just want to find more about your supplier that you're using currently. All right, so that's basically all that I have for source reduction opportunities. So the last thing here are your other options. So those other parts of the triangle that we were looking at earlier. So your next best thing you can do if you can't reduce is to recycle. Oop, lost a slide there. Nope, that's right. Okay. So recycling of all these solvents that we talked about can be done. So you want to consider this if it's an option at your facility. And just based on the EPA definition, you're considered recycling if the waste product is used, reused, or reclaimed once it's been gone through its first life cycle. So Ashley Chambers is actually our environmental services manager who you heard from at the beginning. She also serves as the Alabama Recycling Coalition board president. So this is a great resource for all of y'all's recycling questions, issues, and any kind of vendor contact information if you're looking for a recycling vendor. I've included her email here so that you can reach out to her if you're considering any recycling options for your facility. But so just a kind of example of something you can do with recycling at your facility that also reduces the amount you use overall. So when you're cleaning your parts, you might need some high purity solvents, and then you can use that, save your waste, separate out your waste from your actual solvent, and then use that waste solvent to clean your other, maybe less soiled parts or parts that don't need as much high purity. And if it's really soiled, you can even just use your waste solvent and clean it initially and then run it through a pure solvent for your final cleaning. So this is going to reduce the amount that you have overall. And it also cuts down on the cost of all your raw materials. You're not buying as much solvent if you're recycling. It reduces your waste management costs as well because less is going out to disposal, it's being recycled. It also might change your regulatory status if you're reducing your waste through recycling, which leads to less paperwork and permit fees for you. And of course, you can't forget giving your company a green image, which is great for the public awareness. So some options for you. You might want to use a tank maintenance service or use a commercial recycler, which is a short-term payoff, because again, you're having to pay for them. It's a smaller fee, but you're paying for them every time that you need a recycling service. Or it might be an option for you to buy your own recovery unit, which means that you have a higher initial upfront fee, but a really long-term payoff. So our other options are energy recovery, which is just basically combustion of your chemical in a waste in order to produce heat or energy. And this is not a common thing done on site. So this is not something that you would expect to do at your facility, but it might be something you could contract out for. So it's worth a look if you're at the part or the time where you can't do any type of recycling or source reduction. And then we have treatment, and very similar for that. This is just destruction of your toxic chemicals in your waste, and it's usually done off-site at some type of treatment facility. So if your waste is going to a municipal area, like maybe a sewer or a wastewater plant, you want to make sure they know what's coming in if they're treating it. And if not, if you're contracting someone, it's also very heavily regulated. So it's not a great option compared to the other ones we've looked at. And finally, disposing and other releases. So again, this is our last resource for waste. This means that you have no recycling, no treatment, no energy recovery, and you're going to have all your disposal fees, permitting fees, and increased regulations coming from this. All right, so we're going to go really briefly through this because we're running short on time, but the main resources that you can use in order to do some source reduction at your facility. The first is our TRI database, and we're not going to watch the video, but basically, just this database is great because not only do you report what you're doing to reduce things at your facility, but you can look at other people in your same sector and see what they're doing at their facility. So this is a good way to get real life examples of what you can do better to reduce it at the source. Another option is the list of safer ingredients from the EPA, and I've got the link down here. But basically, it's just chemicals that are safer alternatives that they've listed, and it's grouped by their use. So it's really cool. It goes all the way from ones that are verified as a low concern to ones that are not acceptable to use ever. You've also got the TURI database, which I love. It's basically just a database to find cleaning products that are good for very specific contaminants. I did a search here, or you can see here I've got the contaminant oil and looking for cleaning for parts cleaning. And from that, there were over 2,000 results discovered. And then you can actually refine your search based on what's the most safe. So you can see here your lower concern, there's about 300 different options. And this is what it looks like when you actually go to your options. So it'll tell you what company, what product, how safe it is, what type of contaminant you're cleaning, the substrates, and what type of equipment's used in conjunction with it. So, and if it's effective or not, which is very important. You don't want to use one that's not effective. Some other options, the EPA has this tool which looks for suppliers which have less environmental impact. So that's a great thing to check out. We've also got the SNAP substitutes, which I was talking about earlier, which basically just gives the list of EPA approved substitutes by sector. And some other resources is ECAR, which this is just going to provide you your common FAQs for like all kinds of compliance assistance, whether it's P2 related or your OSHA compliance. All of it's going to be in the environmental side of your OSHA compliance. It's all going to be here. You can also contact them with any questions you may have, and they're pretty good about answering just about anything. And they are technically a partnership between the EPA and the Automotive Recyclers Association, so you know that you're getting a lot of good knowledge that's based on what the EPA requirements are. And lastly, we've got our AAMA, which is our Alabama Automotive Manufacturers Association. So some of you may be coming to this webinar from them. They're great. They facilitate conferences and meetings for the automotive industry, and I think there's one coming up soon. They provide all kind of environmental information, and you can't forget that they're good for networking. So meeting other people in your field, people that can assist you in all kind of compliance related things. Just a great company, so just wanted to mention them. And I'm going to turn it over to Ashley just for a little final say, and we should be good to go after that.
Hey, Kalyn, thank you so very much. I know everybody on today's call really learned a lot from there, especially from those case studies and the resources you shared there at the end. And we'll leave everybody with another resource, which is contacting UA SafeState, because everything Kalyn went over today is exactly the sort of facility assessment and recommendations report recommendation that we would put together after doing a site facility walkthrough for an automotive facility or a tier 1, tier 2 supplier company that needs help reducing their chemical emissions there. So part of implementing a P2 program at a facility means really taking fresh eyes at it. So our team at SafeState prides ourselves in putting together these reports. Let's bring it to the next one, Kalyn, please. Yeah, and so anyways, there's our QR code. If everybody pulls out their camera really quickly, you can hover that over. That brings you straight to our website where our contact information is listed, and you can request your own free P2 facility assessment from SafeState. The question, it's so funny, Kalyn, as you were going through, we did have a question come through, but then you answered the question like 3 slides later. So if anybody has any other questions, I believe that one was resolved there in chat. But one thing, Kalyn, that I will mention that you made a great connection to are the different automotive recycling groups, the automotive manufacturing groups. Those are all very active. And at the end of the day, source reduction is landfill avoidance for a lot of these general wastes. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. And that's what every facility should be trying to accomplish as well. Not only does it reduce your processing costs and your waste disposal costs, but you're doing what you're required to do in regards to all of the regulations. But there is Kalyn's contact information. And like we discussed earlier, heading to the SafeState website for pollution prevention, you get our full staff's contact information as well. And coming up next week, we will wrap up this Accelerating Toward P2 webinar series with an in-depth discussion with Dr. David McPhee, where he will go over energy efficiency and compressed air. And he will also introduce the Industrial Assessment Center that is located here on campus at the University of Alabama, where their group, again, all going back to pollution prevention, energy is a big sector there, taking a look at how the IAC could potentially help your business. They have a vested interest in helping automotive manufacturers. So we are so excited to bring them on next week, same time, same place. So please encourage your coworkers, your colleagues to attend these webinar series. We're having a lot of fun sharing these. So with that, we will wrap today's session. Again, thank you, Kalyn. We want to honor everybody's time today, and so we'll wrap it up there. We hope to see everybody next week.
Yep, thank y'all.